When I got to America, I bought a sandwich at a chain store and walked into the jungle. After I'd gone a long way, I came to a great clearing, but instead of agricultural ground, there was a deep hole.
You know when Lenny Bruce said, the world's sick and I'm the doctor? Well, Ivor's in that position. The world needs Ivor Cutler in order to think differently.
At the bottom bent an old man. He jagged and scraped at the ruddy earth with a pin. Then he took his brush and crumb tray and used them. "Are you looking for something?" I shouted. "Truth," he answered. His voice rose hollowly from the hole.
I like to kind of hold on to a sort of childlike wonder of the world. I think Ivor has that.
"Come and eat with me," I called in a friendly tone. He rose slowly out of the hole, and we sat dangling our legs. I offered him my spam sandwich, but he dragged an onion out of his breast pocket and munched on it, sucking the rich juice back into his mouth as it escaped.
It's quite likely if a stranger goes up to him and says, "Hey, Ivor," he says, "Well, Mr. Cutler to you. I don't think we've been introduced before." You know, he's not going to... He has none of the kind of false bonhomie of show business.
Lunch over, he returned to the bottom and recommenced jagging and scraping and brushing. I lay watching him, the generous nourishment of the spam running round my tubes.
I know Ivor has been selected by people as someone who's changed their lives, not just because he's made them laugh or whatever, but because he's made them approach life differently.
After about a quarter of an hour, he called up, "I found it," and rose once again to the surface, transformed. He looked at peace with the world and with himself, completely self-contained.
I've no idea what devils eat at Ivor's soul, but it somehow gets into the music.
I started to cry, great tears, great bitter tears of envy. He pointed down the hole. I handed him my watch, my money, my return ticket to London and my identity. He handed me the pin and the brush and crumb tray, then left the clearing.
You can't say he's a comedian or a humorist or a poet or an author or a musician. He's not really any of those things. He's just kind of Ivor Cutler.
I dried my tears on the brush, then sank down the hole, swearing softly to myself to look for truth with a pin.
Who but he would think it would be a great idea to send your kid on their very first day to their first school in central London wearing a fucking kilt?
The ship that my grandparents came on, they thought they were going to America, to I'm trying to think, New York.
Ivor's grandparents were Jewish. I guess they were from Russia, as mine were. When the immigrants were trying to get out of Russia and all the other dodgy places around the turn of the century and before, then some of them got conned, and they were on boats thinking they were going to America, but they ended up in Glasgow or London.
The children micturated onto a large sponge, which sat by the window. Gosh, there must be a lot of people from the hospital. If it was girls, the boys had to cluster in a group in a far corner, whilst Grandpa showed them a postcard of the Rugby Venus in colour and explained it to them until the girls' knickers were safe again and hidden. The adults just did it out the window, standing or sitting according to taste, or sex. Voiding the bowels in those days was unheard of. People just kept it in.
Ever since I was born, more or less, I've always seen myself as a lesser being, and I've still got it. And it's all based on something totally different, like my mother's relationship with myself and her not really loving me, which is why I nearly killed my kid brother, because he became the one that Mammy really loved, you know.
He's never sort of got over that. And he was the son, and then his brother was born and he became the son and took the son away from him. And Ivor, I think, felt quite deserted, betrayed in a way.
He was lying in a basket and couldn't do anything, and I went over to where the fire was and I took out the poker, and Auntie Eva happened to come into the kitchen at the same time. And Ivor! Put that down. So I put it down. I wasn't going to fight over it.
He did feel like not one of the chaps at school because he was Jewish.
I had to pay a lot for being a Jew when I was at that time, because I was always the not him, not him. Every Friday night, all us Jews in the family sat round the table, and my mother made the big meal, and we sang all the correct songs to sing.
They'd be singing in 2 or 3 part harmony. So it was, I said, well, that's unusual. And he said, no, it was in the family. He said, we just sang like that.
Once I was a little boy, I had a rubber toy. Oi, 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 what a toy. I opened up its lips and spat in lots of pips. Now my toy is full of forest.
I got made my first song up and invited my mother to come and hear it while I sat at the piano and sang it. And I sang it. And I turned to her and I said, well, Mammy, what do you think? And she gave me a funny kind of smile, sort of stiff. And she said, yeah, yes, it's very nice. And then she broke and said, Ivor, couldn't you write something nice?
They didn't appreciate him at the time, no. Well, he did go to Glasgow School of Art. They completely misunderstood what he was trying to get on with. But he did say he learned how to draw. He joined up. I think he quite enjoyed it, going to Canada and doing the training there and going up on the plane and being too dreamy. So when they sent someone up to test him to see whether he'd navigated properly, he was too busy looking at the stars and the wonderful clouds or whatever it was. And but he was very good on all the rest of it. In the NAFI, there was always a piano, and that's where he sort of picked up his jazz, he said, because there was always someone who played jazz, and he would just stand by and watch and listen, and then he'd sit down and learned how to do it himself. It was after the war. I don't know why he wanted to become a teacher, but there seems to be a lot of teacher in him. In every teacher's drawer there was the strap, and you had to use it. And I think when he finally decided he'd had enough, he took the strap out of the drawer and he cut it into little pieces.
As legend would have it, he escaped from Scotland, which I guess was a source of certain amounts of pain to him.
That was the beginning of my life, going down to London.
And he found his teaching thing in Suffolk and came down south.
At a stroke, he got away from, you know, one extreme, beating kids with a belt, to Summerhill.
I guess he just had an interest in Summerhill because it seemed like a much more in tune with how he felt about teaching.
Well, Summerhill was founded in 1921. If you read one of Neil's books that he wrote in the 1930s, it would still be the same Summerhill.
And I got hold of this book, and just knocked me. I couldn't believe that there could be anything like, I think I said about it, like fairyland.
Summerhill's very alternative approach to education, and the basic idea is that we're looking to educate the whole person.
I built a house around a mouse, I made it big and strong. Damn, it's fallen down. Damn, it's fallen down.
And one of the things that Summerhill's always done is to allow people, sort of alternative people who are a little bit off the wall, to express themselves and be part of the school. And that's one of the things that, in a way, Summerhill's rejoiced in, and the children like that.
And crushed the mouse unto a pulp. Oh, mouse. I wrenched aside the slabs of stone and pulled him out by his face. His tail was at 90 degrees.
Ivor would have lived on the premises because all the teachers do that. I mean, part of it is being a community. He would have lived in as part of the school, and he would have been involved in meetings and so on and so forth. Possibly would have lived in some sort of hut, an outbuilding, because that's where often the teachers and staff lived.
Where's the mouse, my husband cried, when he came back home from the library. The house fell down, I pulled him out by the face and threw him down a stream.
Ivor was able to kind of explore his silliness at Summerhill and realise that the children really grasped it and loved it, and maybe in a more conventional environment he wouldn't have been able to do that.
I discovered that if the kids were laughing, or I couldn't resist being funny. In so doing, they managed to lose the stiffness where education was working away at. He slumped on a stool and would not eat his yoghurt, lift with jam. His cheeks were bright with tears for the poor wee pulped mouse.
Well, I've been married, of course, to a Gentile, which did not go down well with his Jewish parents, obviously.
He was desperate to have a family, to have children, and that was very important to him, having the two boys. And when the marriage failed, it was a very desperate time for him.
I don't think he was a conventional father by any stretch of the imagination, but I know that his sons were very important to him.
But I don't see him in any sort of traditional family role.
It was different. He was perfectly capable of blending in if he chose, but in general he wouldn't.
He was teaching then in Nottingham Gate because that's where his boys were living.
When I came down to London and went to school with the 30, 40 kids in I learned a lot about how I thought the best way to teach a kid is to give them the ambience in which to do it.
We would, for example, all have to go to the back of the room, come forward one by one and announce to everybody that we were beautiful. And, and then scamper down the front, sit down, and the next one would come along and do it.
Music played quite a big part in all of Ivor's classes, even the poetry, I suppose. And the dance that we did, he'd always play the piano for us to run around the room.
A man had woolen eyes, he couldn't see very well. I knitted them into a great big ball and rolled them down the hill. Ba-ra-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ra-ba-da-ba-da.
We'd all go home singing about rubbish or something.
When they came home from my class, at the end of the day, the parents would say anything interesting, and they'd say, "Hey, I'm Mr. Cutler," and I'd say, "Oh yeah," and they'd say, "Well, explain, what did you do," or something like that. And then they'd do it.
And certainly there were aggrieved parents who felt that their children weren't being taught properly, were fended off by the then head teacher, who I think was a great supporter and actually probably quite important in keeping him in a job.
When he saw what he had done, he said, "Where are my eyes?" I gave him 2 new proper ones so he could see all right. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. He came right up to me and punched me on the knee. "Now give me back my woolen ones, I like the way I saw."
One thing I remember actually is we used to play a game called Cowboys and Indians and Red Cross. And he'd have different music on the piano for each of these. So if it was, there'd be cowboy music and you'd go around killing everyone. Horrible, really. But it all came good in the end, because then he'd have this special music that was for the Red Cross, who would go round and make everyone better and bring them back to life.
I ran to the bottom of the hill and brought the big ball back. I made them into woolen ones and placed them where they belonged. Ba-ra-ba-da-ba-da. If ever you see a man with a couple of woolen eyes, run away with a saucy grin, he can see as well as you. Ba-ra-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ra-ba-da-ba-da.
He's a person that's incredibly principled and has always stuck to his guns and never kind of compromised with anything remotely commercial or anything like that. When he took his songs to what was then Tin Pan Alley, which were a kamikaze sort of thing to do really in those days. It was very, very mainstream, of course. You know, it was before the blues and rock had made any kind of impact, really. So it was terribly anodyne, and I can imagine him, being like a penguin in in a desert. So it was remarkable that he got that break with Ned Sherrin.
I've heard about Ivor because there was a curious music publisher called Box, a music firm called Box and Cox. He was always known as Boxy, and he's great. He rang me up and said he was very important because he also published the Bishop of Brisbane, I think, who was Hermione Baddeley's brother. And he got this wonderful, strange man, so would I go and hear this man? So I took my old collaborator, Carol Brahms, who was... He must have been about 60 or something then, and we toddled round to Denmark Street after hours and found this sordid little entrance in the south side of Denmark Street. And I don't think we knocked on the door. I went straight in, I think, and Carol followed, and there was Boxy peeing in the wash basin at the time, which he quickly brought to a close when he saw a lady in the room, and said, "Here is this wonderful man whom he obviously couldn't understand at all. I mean, he plainly had no idea what he was handling." And Ivor was sitting at that little harmonium-y thing that he carried around and played a couple of numbers. And Carol said, "It's very, very obvious. It's surrealist folk," which I suppose is as good a definition as you could ever get of Ivor's stuff.
Do you ever feel lonely? Of course I do.
Boxy, I think, thought he was a lunatic. I think he thought he was possibly certifiable, and perhaps he should get an independent witness. I was happy to find that he wasn't certifiable, and he was enchanting. And it was a wonderful, fresh voice. He seemed very, very pleased that somebody had recognised up to a point what he was doing and not just thought he was mad. And so I booked him for a week on the old Cliff Mitchell Tonight programme, this must have been late 50s, I think.
The green rain is falling on you. Gather your soup bowl, make your way to the west side of the island, and wait there for the green rain to fall.
He wanted to make a record in those days, and we'd rehearse in his little flat for days on end, doing all his wonderful tunes. We recorded a lot of the Ludo record at EMI Studios with George Martin. We were sort of inventing things at the time of recording, which George didn't like very much. And there was some, if you listen to the record, there are some strange sort of off-scene noises. Trevor and I had to hum behind the tune, which Ivor was singing and playing. And we got the giggles, and this went on take after take after take. And if you can imagine trying to hum when you're trying not to laugh, it was so mad. And we looked through this glass window at George Martin, and his face was furious. We had wonderful fun with that record. And that's the thing about Ivor, is that whatever you do, he looks incredibly serious, but in fact, he's laughing inside the whole time.
I'm going in a field to lie down.
It was a big hit in my mind. I'm going in a field. I'm going in a field. I'm going in a field. That was the note I loved. To lie down. I thought, that is good.
That was Ivor Cutler's Pibroch to welcome Scottish watchers to late night line-up.
Walking down a very narrow alley in the street, I saw an old man standing by a wall. Hastily I ran up to the old man, and I said to him in phrases very small, "Get away from the wall, get away from the wall, get away from the wall."
I saw him on the television in the 60s and was impressed and amused by his laconic sense of humour and his Scottish wit. And I actually just rang him up. I got a number for him. And I just thought, he's the kind of guy I wouldn't mind going out to dinner with. So I said, hello, Mr. Cutler. Hello. I said, it's Paul McCartney here. He said, oh, yes. And I said, and I'd like to invite you out to dinner, basically. He said, oh, very well. And he thought about it for a little while, and he eventually accepted the invitation. So we went out to dinner and we became friends.
He came along to my place where I was in one of these little rooms, like about the whole thing was about this size. And he said hello and smiled, and I smiled back, and he just got on my bed, which was all with his shoes, and just lay back and started talking.
One night in the mid-1960s, Paul McCartney and John Lennon tuned into Late Night Line-Up and beheld a small Scottish figure at the harmonium. It was Ivor Cutler, philosopher, poet and musician. The Beatles were so impressed that they cast him in their film The Magical Mystery Tour.
Well, you know, when we started Magical Mystery Tour, it was in a fairly sort of mad period of the 60s. And I think, you know, in the Beatles, we just sort of said, oh, let's make a film, you know, yeah.
Good morning, men and women.
You know, we just thought we'd get a bunch of people we love, you know, like Viv and Ivor. And I'd always loved the Bonzos. Just people who were sort of crazy heroes of ours and eccentric, and we'll just see what we can come up with.
Magical Mystery Tour, I mean, the Bonzos only did the strip club scene, so we weren't actually on the bus. But Ivor and Co, off the bus, were in the strip club. And I remember, you know, Ivor, who can forget Ivor's face? I mean, he's only got to sort of look.
We wanted Ivor as one of the main characters that we would base it all around. And I knew that if we were going to make it up, it's the kind of thing he could get into.
I am your friendly courier. Mr. Blood Vessel is my name. Buster Blood Vessel.
Ivor sort of said, well, you know, I think I'd like my character's name to be Buster Blood Vessel. I went, good choice.
I am concerned for you to enjoy yourselves within the limits of British decency. You know what I mean, don't you? Well, don't you?
Yes, Mr. Blood Vessel. When I did the bus going through the countryside, I watched, well, the four of them actually, like mad. People were all and treated, you know, beautifully, better than I could have done.
It was all improvising. The whole thing, we would just take the bus somewhere and like stop and say, oh, here's a sandy beach. Now, and you know, the thing became that Ivor was in love with Jessie, who was the fat lady. I think it was Ivor's idea to draw a heart around her in the sand, which was very cute, you know, these. I think then, anyone who was in a love scene was sort of a fine young man and a fine young lady, you know, like Baywatch or something. And so it was nice to do it with characters other than that. And I think it's something we kind of like, people who just sort of say, this is me, this is what I do. And he's certainly one of them.
Scotland gets its brains from the herring, said Grandpa. And we all nodded our heads with complete incomprehension. Sometimes, for a treat, we got playing with their heads, glutinous, bony affairs, without room for brains and the look of lust on their narrow soprano jaws. The time I lifted the lid of the midden on a winter night, and there, a cool blue gleam, herring heads. Other heads do not gleam in the dark, so perhaps Grandpa was right.
He captures. There's a word in Scotland, dreich, D-R-E-I-C-H, for that depressing, grey, drizzly weather that won't, it doesn't thunder down on you and soak you, it seeps into you like a rumour. And it's, you look out the window and say, my God, it's dreich out there, isn't it? Well, he can encapsulate dreich like nobody on earth.
The sky grew black and white. The wind blew under the door. Let us go for a walk, said Father. We rose slowly from our positions towards the door. The door locked tight. We set off in a straggly line, hugging the wall to escape the worst of the effects of the fresh air.
Keeping close to the wall to escape the worst effects of the fresh air. He would point out things of interest. There's a tree, he would say.
When we left the street and were in the country, Father became instructive. There is a thistle, he would cry into the wind, pointing a pale finger, and we looked. Then further along, there is another thistle, again pointing. There were lots of thistles in Scotland.
The heaviest people in the world are the doubly ethnic, you know. I mean, obviously the heaviest thing you can get is a black Scottish Jew, you know. But apart from that, a Scottish Jew is an unbelievably heavy thing to be.
I can see him in the past, 2 centuries ago, being the sort of the joker in the shtetl, But then you mix in Scottish or that kind of the kind of doerness you get there with that, then you get a unique blend, really.
Mother was also informative. Look, a patch of grass. And we dutifully twisted our heads, then hugged the dry stone dyke to escape the worst of the effects of the fresh air.
In so much of what he talks about, there's an exaggerated Scottishness. It's like, of course, like in the 40s or whatever, nobody was running around in Glasgow wearing a kilt. But it's almost like he plays on this idea that other people have of what it's like to be Scottish.
There are quite a lot of people in Scotland I'm rather amused by, especially the ones that are really Scottish. You know. After tea, Father played the pipes and we danced reels on the dyke. Often we slipped and gashed our thighs quite badly. But nobody cared in those days.
At the heart of a real comedian is a terrifying sadness, of course, always. You can't escape that. And he's got it in spades, basically. There is a melancholy that sits over him, his awareness of the world and what it does to people, the cruelty in particular, is something he focuses on in his work a lot.
Well, that happens quite a lot with funny people. In the way you react to the Drich or the Calvinism, the Presbyterianism, or the tiresomeness of Catholicism and blah, de blah, de blah. Well, you also react to a lack of love, as you see it anyway, with a joy, an explosion, a kind of a humour.
Home, we returned to our positions, while Father snored with his head on the table, and Mother mixed porridge. We listened to the wind and winked and smiled, absent-mindedly rubbing spittle on our cuts.
Well, for me, it is Ivor. Now, it's not exactly his family. I mean, obviously, it didn't happen like that. But to me, it did happen like that. I can see him in these situations. I can see him and his brothers and sisters, his mum and dad, and all the various episodes, to me, are very, very alive and real.
He became very friendly with Phyllis. In fact, she became his partner, and they lived not together because they kept separate flats, but they were an item, as it were, for 30 years.
They were wonderful together because they were like yin and yang. I loved them as a pair, really. I think they needed each other.
It was clearly they were soul partners. You know, she was as far out as he is, and of course they did shows together.
When I was too small to reach, I had a box.
Why is your coat so thick, Joe? Why is your coat so thick? It seems thicker every day. What's it got to do with you? That's the way I like my coat. My coats have always been thick.
She was definitely in his Scotch sitting room, in his idealised Scotch sitting room.
It's a very beautiful song. Beautiful cosmos. You are the centre of your little world, and I am of mine. Now and again we meet for tea, we're two of a kind. This is our universe, cups for tea. We have a beautiful cosmos, you and me. We have a beautiful cosmos. What do we talk of whenever we meet? Nothing at all. You sit with a sandwich, I look at a roll. Sometimes I open my mouth, then shut it. We have a beautiful cosmos, you and me. we have a beautiful cosmos.
Off and on we were together since about, I suppose, 1971. With, as I say, off and on times. When I first met him, he lived in Parliament Hill, in the flat he's in now.
As I became friendly with Ivor, he eventually invited me to his flat, which was on the 3rd floor of a terraced house. He had a very interesting arrangement to get the post, in that he had a bulldog clip on a very long piece of string, and one of his fellow tenants would put his post in the bulldog clip every morning, and he would pull it up to his flat like that so he didn't have to go downstairs. His flat was originally, I think, owned by a photographer called Joyce Edwards. Ivor had placed an ad in the New Statesman saying, "IVOR CUTLER seeks room near Heath, cheap." And Joyce had replied to that ad and offered him a room, which was the flat that he lived in and still lives in for 30 odd years.
Alfie and I got to know Phyllis and Ivor in the 70s when they used to come around together. We lived near enough Kew for Ivor, who as far as I know has never moved, to... he used to like to come and visit Kew Gardens, and he would stop off at our place for a cup of tea or two.
They used to come together more or less once a fortnight. But what was strange was that everything in our house was the loud music, cigarette smoke, drafty doors, everything that Ivor loathed, but he just kept coming back. In another situation, he would have been complaining and things would have had to be turned off, up, down, out for him.
But there would be things like Bulgarian folk music which interested him. And some of the jazz. We had quite a few jazz friends in common.
A couple of occasions the doorbell would ring, so he'd go and answer the door and confront the person as if it was his house, tease them in such a way that was really embarrassing, and kind of take over their whole visit. But there was always a point in the afternoon, after a couple of hours, when he'd say, "Phyllis, I must go."
He would be exhausted, or you'd run out of things to say, or somehow it was the right time. 3 hours was about it, and then we'd have to go.
He liked interacting with people, but I think very much on his terms. He liked it to be when he wanted to do it. There were times when he would not answer the phone and just shut himself away and do whatever Ivor did. And there were other times when he would want to be garrulous and go and meet them, but it was always very much on his terms.
The sun has set, the stars are out, I hear your feet on the mat. Hello dear, it's dark outside, the moon's in the sky, would you like a glass of lemonade? How about a walk? I'll show you the stars, I'll kiss you in the dark. Have you eaten a pie and chips? Yes. Forget about the kiss in the dark. I'll just have the lemonade, thanks.
Writing for children, he was able to incorporate some of his own ideas about how he felt about children and their parents, of course. So in a way it was quite mischievous as well, because he would put in things which were meant for the parents, of course.
He just suggested that to his publisher that he had these 4 stories that I might be able to do. So he gave me a page and a half of typing, which was Herbert the Chicken, and then another one, Herbert the Elephant, and then there were 2 more. After he gave me the story, there was never any, he didn't interfere in any way.
He obviously related to children in a different way to many adults. I think he could talk to them and understand them from their point of view and from his point of view. And I think that really influenced his work, which is why I think he wanted to write children's books that were not what might be called normal children's books. And I think he himself said that children unlocked his creativity.
He would go everywhere on the bike because he didn't drive, and I don't think he liked to feel he was dependent on someone to take him somewhere in the car. When he could have a bike, he could go when and where he wanted.
I was walking along the London Embankment and I saw this rather wobbly figure in a yellow cycle cape coming along on a bicycle. I thought, it's Ivor, you know, so I thought, I won't go, hey, you know. I crept over towards him and said, Ivor? And he went, whoa, oh, it's you. And then fished in his pocket and came out with these sort of stickers. He always had stickers on little reels, and he peeled off about 6 and gave them to me. And these just simply said, slightly imperfect. And then another one, 6 again, you know, and they said, no, exclamation mark. And, you know, and you realise that these were great. You know, you could go up to something you disapproved of and go, no, or slightly imperfect, you know.
Ivor loved the zoo, and Phyllis would often accompany him to the zoo, and they would draw together and write poems and drink tea and just hang out there, really, I think.
We'd sit there in front of cages and write poetry. He liked to see the animals, but he never saw them the way one ordinarily thinks of animals. His idea of the animals was quite different.
They used to have these keys that you used to go around the zoo with, and you pay your money, turn the key, and you get a little commentary about the animal. And he faked a couple, you know, and so there was some poor kid comes along, thinks they're going to get a commentary on the camel, say, and there's this lugubrious, this is a camel. It has 4 legs, 1 at each corner, you know, and it went on in that sort of vein.
There's a kind of almost childlike, impish mischievousness about him, which just doesn't say, I am a great artist, although he is.
He's obsessed by the small, by the detail, by, you know, stuff at the periphery, dust, little insects, microbes.
He used to read a lot about insects. We'd go a lot to second-hand bookshops, and he would always be finding more books about insects and what insects, what they ate and how they lived their lives.
He was covered in flies. There were like house flies, but you pinned on yourself. And I didn't want to ask about it, you know, in case it was something really obvious that guys like him did and I should know.
I believe in bugs. I truly believe in bugs. See their happy faces as they swagger along, shaking at their tonsils as they belt out their song, singing, I believe in bugs. I truly believe in bugs. When you squat down at the seaside for a snack on the beach, you can hear the buggies chortle as they jump out of reach. I believe in bugs. I truly believe in bugs. Lying in the silken ground one day, I shall sense the buggies wriggle as they eat me away, singing, I believe in bugs.
Eric Idle brought him along to the show. I get so nervous. I mean, it's like bringing Spike Milligan to your show. What are you, you're John Lennon or something? You don't know what to do. And he sat on the floor, so I sat on the floor as well. In the middle of the conversation, he says, would you like a fly? I said, I'd love a fly. So he pinned it on my coat, and we never said anything else.
I think Ivor's influence on people like the Bonzos and Monty Python is quite strong, because, I mean, we belong to a generation that grew up listening to the Goon Show as well. So we pretty much got used to this sort of surreal kind of humour. The imagery of, you know, I mean, in the Goons, you know, the pen is far mightier than the budget on radio.
Ivor used to write these ridiculous sketches, and I knew he wanted to play all the parts. And it was best when he did, because when I engaged other people, very good actors, actresses, it never quite came off, because however hard they tried, they couldn't. They acted and he didn't. He was.
Hello?
Hello. Is that Mr. Cutler?
No, it's not.
When he took it all over himself, he would be the voice in the street, the voice on the telephone, the voice that was him, possibly the voice in his head.
Would you like a word with him?
I should like that.
Then I'll look out the window and see where he is.
The result was rather remarkable.
Hello?
Hello.
He's down the road.
Could you call him for me?
He's a mile and a bit down the road.
Oh, damn.
He's the only artist to ever have been on radios 1, 2, 3 and 4. And I can't think of anybody else that would do that.
I distinctly remember the first time I heard Ivor Cutler. And I remember being in bed in a darkened room listening to the Peel programme on the radio, and he was playing records by the likes of, you know, you get the Buzzcocks 1 minute and then you get Prince Far Eye or some heavy dub thing the next. And in the middle of all this, popped up on that particular evening I was listening, it happened to be a session by Ivor Cutler. I'd never heard him before.
Every year, a new bunch of kids starts on Radio 1 and discovers me in among the other work. And knowing that it's John Peel and knowing that the other work is stuff that they can enjoy, and they come across me, they say, oh, well, if Peel thinks it's good enough to put out, it's good enough for us, and they get hooked on it.
I'd become the entertainment secretary. I was booking all the bands at Leeds. So, rather nervously, I rang this number, and it rang and rang and rang and rang, and eventually, hello? I said, hello, I'm, explained who I was. I said, I'm looking for Ivor Cutler. This is Ivor speaking. I said, do you do gigs? Would you be prepared to come up to Leeds University and do as a set? And he said, how much will you pay? So I thought, oh, I don't want to insult him. So I said, how about £400? There's a silence at the other end. And his voice says, offer me less, which really threw me. So I said, OK, £300. Done and done, he said at the other end.
Our next guest has been making radio and TV audiences feel uneasy for about 30 years. I first heard him on the John Peel programme in the 70s, reading episodes from his life in a Scotch sitting room. Ivor Cutler.
I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and I'll punch the man who says I'm not. I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and I'll punch the man who says I'm not. I'm happy, punch. I'm happy, punch. I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy.
Rough trade recording artiste Ivor Cutler straight into the indie charts with a bullet with his new LP Gruts.
Ivor's been signed to most of the major record labels in his time. He's been with Virgin, he's been with EMI, he's been with Rough Trade, he's been with Creation. Alan McGee, who signed Oasis, signed him to the label. And all of these people signed him to the label just because they wanted him on the label. It was no great economic prospect to sign Ivor Cutler because they certainly never made their fortunes out of it. People just wanted to sign him just to have him because he was such an iconic figure and they all loved him.
Rock people loved him. The literary world, the poetic world, the figurative art world went, oh yeah, he's funny. But rock said, oh, he's one of us.
Pyjamas taste like digestive biscuits. Are you sure you haven't got it the wrong way around?
I think people in the world of music, or rock, or certainly independent music as well in particular, love him because he's an outsider, because they're outsiders as well. And but not just an outsider. He's not like a freak or anything like that. He's somebody who's placed himself on the outside and shows no fear.
When I say that I am stupid, I am not making a comparison.
So Ivor came along and he did the opening set for Elvis Costello, and the festival hall were a bit anxious about what this quiet little man, how he would hold an Elvis Costello rock and roll audience. And in fact, it was magical, absolutely perfect. Went down, he was very funny, very surprising, and just a shocking, more shocking than any punk could dream of being, really. And when Costello came on, he started with the first thing he said was, I think Ivor Cutler should be made a Knight of Scotland. And everyone went, yeah, you know.
He's the kind of guy that's got a true, I don't know, what do you want, rock and roll, punk rock ethos. These kind of phrases that people throw about to describe somebody who doesn't see things in the conventional way.
I wrought an iron goldfish and threw it in the sea. I didn't like what I found it there and came right back to me. I rubbed its scales with a filthy towel and threw it in the kitchen drawer. It swims around midst the knives and forks and throws the spoons on the scullery floor.
He said, I'm doing this thing at Hackney Empire, would you like to join us, you know, just the three of us? That was me and him and Phyllis, and so of course I jumped at it. An hour before the show started, there were only a sprinkling of people in there, and he got very agitated and upset, you know. He thought it was going to be a complete washout, and about 10 minutes later, somebody rushed in and said, have you seen outside? There are queues waiting to get in, and it's right round the block.
I used to kind of promote bands in a place called the 13th Note in Glasgow as well, and I remember we were doing a festival, like a week-long festival, and we were getting all these exciting bands, and we were desperate to get Ivor Cutler up. The problem was, all the shows were starting about 9 o'clock in the evening and then running through till later on. And Ivor would only come up if he could fly up and be back in his house in time for his tea.
He didn't like staying overnight as he got older. He didn't like staying overnight in hotels or places like that. And I remember one particular time, I think it was in Oxford, and by the time the concert was over and we went to the hotel room and he discovered there was traffic noise or there was radiator noise, and they took us from room to room to try and see if we could find a room that would suit. And then we both remember one dreadful time in Birmingham, I think, where he was put up at the organiser's house, which was very kind of them, and we were in I think a room in the basement, which was very, very cold, and it was winter. And there was a small gas heater, but everything seemed damp, and Ivor couldn't seem to get warm. And in the end, he just sat on the bed with all his clothes on, wishing he were dead and hoping morning would come soon so we could leave. And we said thank you very much for the very nice evening, and we were gone.
Hello, Billy. Tea time. Grats for tea. Billy, Billy, come on, son. Grats for tea. Fresh grats. Oh, I don't want grats for tea, Daddy. What? I went out specially and got them for you. Oh, but Daddy, we had grats yesterday. Look, son, I walked 7 miles to the Highwood to get you grats. That's 14 miles in all, counting the journey back. And you don't want grats. I fried them for you. Fried grats. I fried them in butter. I don't want them, Daddy. Daddy, we've had grats for 3 years now. I'm fed up with grats. I don't want them anymore. Daddy, can't we have something else for tea?
In the very late 80s, Ivor rang me one day and said, I've had my picture painted. I said, oh, really? It's in the National Portrait Gallery, which was a bit of a shock to me. So I went to the National Portrait Gallery, and the painting was part of an exhibition of great British poets, and was stunned to see this fantastic picture of Ivor there amongst all these other luminaries.
Somebody described my stuff as poetry, and I just became a poet, and I couldn't scrape it away or anything like that. But it seems to be those people who've called it poetry were using it in a different kind of way, I think.
Yeah, you know, I think there are some people who just aren't meant for the mainstream. They're better off on the fringes. It's sort of where they want to swim. You know, it's too fast, all that mainstream.
Ivor was highly individual and highly creative, but he was an oddball. He was possibly unique, and unique doesn't get a lot of followers. Unique is something special, and I suppose IVOR is the IVOR fans are the ultimate cult, I suppose. That's the best word to apply to IVOR, I think, is cult.
That's free silence that you're getting just now.
I am one of the lucky ones who are able not to have to think about it. Just allow it to come out of its own free will whenever it fancies. And so one can be moving about between different kind of things, just like a kid, I suppose, with these toys.
I will sing the last song. And then I'll get up and leave here. And what you do, I won't say, come back, come back.
Hey, look, there at the back, a wooden tree. Isn't it a pretty one? Hey, look, there at the back, a wooden tree. Isn't it a pretty one? I called my father to come and look. He cleaned his throat, he started to sing. Hey, look, there at the back, a wooden tree. Isn't it a pretty one? I called my mother, she took a look, began to bellow. She called my brother, who was round at the back, though flat at the front, to come and look. But he wouldn't come, because he hated the words, and he knew the tune, so he started to hum. Along came an artist with paint on his brush. He painted the tree, and now it looks horrible. But we keep on singing, because we're optimists. Hey, look.
I hope it hasn't been in vain. I've had my shot as well, and most graciously, thank you very much. Good night.
She womanly lay like the lay of the land around Wheelie Down, and every curve was a high, high hill to hang above the town. From Holland they came to make the maps, and they had made her well, for the rivers danced all across the green, and the pine wood sweet did smell.